8-hour time-restricted eating linked to a 91% higher risk of cardiovascular death. This is from the American Heart Association. An analysis of over 20,000 U.S. adults found that people who limited their eating across less than 8 hours a day, a time-restricted eating plan, were more likely to die from cardiovascular disease compared to people who ate across a 12 to 16 hours per day, according to preliminary research presented at the American Heart Association's Epidemiology and Prevention, Lifestyle and Cardiometabolic Scientific Sessions of 2024 in Chicago. Now, I love Chicago, but I would not have been at that party. The meeting offers the latest science on population-based health and wellness and implications for lifestyle. I'm not going to read the rest of this. You guys can go into details. What are they saying? Because to me, this sounds like 8 hours a day. Like that's not really what most people consider time-restricted eating. For most people, it's 6 hours or less, or even less than that. Intermittent fasting, for those that aren't familiar with the terminology, intermittent fasting is what we're talking about here.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack in just what you said there. I think the key thing to revisit is that, yes, this was a presentation to kind of get people talking and thinking about additional things to begin to study over time. I think that it was just this irresponsible title that got so many people talking over the last 8 months or however long this has been out. Yeah. I think these, while technically correct, the relative risk increase was in fact 91%. It's too clickbaity for heart.org, Yes. For our YouTube channel, that's fine. We could do all the clickbait we want. But if you're the AHA, you have to be careful especially because this isn't like a fully fleshed out, finalized. You can see all the details of what they did. And also because it's just really not the most rigorously constructed paper, so to speak, to begin with. So I think, again, at the beginning, that's the biggest issue with it. It's a problematic title. It was more or less just a poster presentation, but without a doubt had the internet in shambles as we're a little late on it, but it's still worth. That's all right. Still worth discussing.
People who followed a pattern of eating all of their food across less than 8 hours per day had a 91% higher risk of death due to cardiovascular disease. The increased risk of cardiovascular death was also seen in people living with heart disease or cancer. No kidding. Among people with existing cardiovascular disease, an eating duration of no less than 8, but less than 10 hours per day was associated with a 66% higher risk of death and from heart disease or stroke. Time-restricted eating did not reduce the overall risk of death from any cause. An eating duration of more than 16 hours per day was associated with a lower risk of cancer mortality among people with cancer. Okay, break this down. Help me understand this because I'm still irritated by this. Because this, based on that headline, if I skip breakfast and I eat lunch at noon, that means I eat my last meal at 7, right? So then I'm done by 8 o'clock. If I take a really long time to eat, that's 8 hours. And I'm at a 91% higher risk of cardiovascular death from that.
So there's a few different things to look at here. I'll just start with the way the study was set up. This is not a study of intermittent fasters. Right. That's what it appears to be, but it is not. It is basically surveys of 20,000 people, and they ask them. So they're going to evaluate these people over the median length is 8 years based on 2 days of reporting when they ate last. They didn't ask, are you an intermittent faster? They said
they're just looking back at data that already exists and seeing based on how they answered, determining what eating window they fit in. So like right off the bat, it's
based on what you say, self-reported from 2 days, they're going to extrapolate an average median length study and slap on there that it's 8 years.
Okay.
24-hour recall is what I read.
24-hour recall in terms of reporting on those 2 days.
Recall questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking like, how long did you go without eating yesterday?
Yesterday?
That's kind of the base. That's sort of the rigor of the question being asked.
Peekaboo.
About to eat a cat.
Wow, I got to get refocused after that. This is why you have to watch, guys. You just missed all the comedy if you aren't watching. Okay, well, that seems that. So then, if that's the case, then what is the value in this at all? Because you were saying that there is still some good data in here.
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like there's much to take away, because it sort of goes counter to what the available research is at this point.
Yeah, knowing that it's not intermittent fasters. In other words, people who are making a conscious lifestyle decision in an attempt to make themselves healthier.
Yeah.
That helps a lot because
Yeah, I mean, these are potentially people who are already fairly sick.
Yeah.
And literally can't get themselves to eat much throughout the day. And so they just fall into a given, what's the word? Spontaneous sort of eating pattern.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what's really tough on this one is cancer. It can be very hard to eat your appetite. So they're drawing those conclusions. If you're not really eating much cancer, your mortality risk goes up. If you're eating throughout the day, mortality goes down. So that one specifically along those lines of patterns. But yeah, this could they're making it sound like it's a study about intermittent fasters when reality is there's most of these people are probably just breakfast skippers.
Exactly. I know we glossed over this at the outset, but time-restricted feeding, what they specifically mention, falls under the intermittent fasting umbrella. To a lot of people, it's just a matter of semantics. Yeah. Doesn't really matter. However you want to look at it is fine. But just so people know, there are many iterations, even like you said, of what it means to be fed and fasting in 6 hours versus 8 hours versus alternate day fasting versus multi-day fasting. I mean, there's so much then to let alone not really even be, none of these people potentially were using this, we're actually employing this strategy.
Right.
So yes, not to.
Yeah, no, that's exactly because there's a ton of data, maybe not conclusive, but there's a ton of data that suggests that some form of time restricted eating is actually really beneficial for you in a number of different ways. So that's part of why this is such an inflammatory headline, is it flies in the face of everything else. And with a 91% higher risk.
And it's kind of like saying, well, yeah, you have all this short-term data that's good. Well, here's the long-term. And it's supposed to be like this sledgehammer, which, I mean, if that was the case,
sure,
glad putting it out there, but it's just, it's way too flawed to draw that conclusion yet.
Yeah. And this is all merely observational research, obviously. And then also, like I said, a lot of this observational research simply doesn't line up with the interventional data that we have. The authors in this paper show that there's a negative impact on cardiovascular disease mortality, whereas in the interventional research specifically, there's really never a major effect on actual markers of cardiovascular disease. So my point being, you would think if this was truly bad for those that have cardiovascular disease or who have cancer or make cardiovascular disease worse, or they die sooner from it, you would think that either something's happening with their blood cholesterol, you would think that they've had more heart attacks. There would be some biomarker or something measured interventionally that would start to reflect what's being seen here. And you just we don't see that.
Well, okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that my nonsense meter, when it pinged reading this headline, that it wasn't completely out to lunch.
Yeah, if we didn't get titles like this and headlines like this, what would we be talking about?
That's right.
The AHA does a lot of good stuff, of course. So to be clear, they knock it out of the park with a lot of things.
Yep.
It's just that when you hold yourself to that higher of a regard and then you drop some heat like this, you're going to face some backlash, and that's all right.
And you should.
Yeah.
You should.
And if they end up doing some more quality long-term study on this,
I'll eat my shoe. I'll eat my shoe 100%. Hey, whatever.
In that window. Eat it over a 14 to 16 hours
within that window. Yeah. I'd be curious. There's in the article, it says follow the conference and there's a hashtag. And so I looked it up, and not anywhere, because I got to get a glimpse at these poster presentations.
No one used the hashtag,
but no, people did, but there's not this presentation, the one that this article is based off. There's nothing there, and there's multiple things. Going to present my first time at the AHA conference and all this stuff, and I'm like,
so apparently this was really popular at the conference as well.
That's what I'm saying. I wonder.
Interesting.
And again, it's not like the number. It's not like they lied about numbers. It's not like there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing. I think.
Well,
nefarious here, but it's just that it is what it is. The numbers don't lie. It was a 91% increase, but based on what premise? The complete bizarre nonsense, non-rigorous premise.
100% of people who drink water die. So
Right, exactly.
I mean, you might want to consider that before you get that
Yep.
glass next time.
Yep.